Hi, and thanks for stopping by my channel. My name is Jeremy Yunt, and this is my first ever YouTube video. I'm making it because back in 2015, I published a book on Paul Tillich, and I wanted to mark its 10-year anniversary with a few videos on it. The book is titled Love, Gravity, and God, Paul Tillich and the Existential Depths of Reason and Religion. It consists of 10 chapters with an introduction and a foreword. The foreword is written by Tillich's last teaching assistant at Harvard, Dr. Paul Lee. After this one, I plan to put together several other short videos, with each briefly going over another chapter of the book. This video is an introduction to Tillich, what my book is about, and what my personal experiences were that led me to writing it. For those who don't know much about Tillich, I just want to mention a few quick details. When Hitler rose to power in 1933, Tillich was serving as chair of the philosophy department at the University of Frankfurt. He had just published his book, The Socialist Decision, which was a scathing rebuke of National Socialism. During this time, Nazi brown shirts were entering the university and beating up leftist and Jewish students, whom Tillich personally protected. These two things, amongst others, put him in direct opposition to Hitler. But he was still called to the office of Hitler's Minister of Education, whom he had an hour-long discussion with. Tillich was offered a prestigious professorship at the University of Berlin if he would denounce his book. His response was to laugh in the minister's face. It was then that he knew it was over. Tillich's book was burned in the streets by the Nazis, and his life was clearly in danger. He became the first non-Jewish intellectual dismissed from his academic post in Hitler's purge, something he considered an honor. As we know, this is the opposite path of Martin Heidegger, whom Tillich had recently taught with at the University of Marburg. Tillich also served on the front lines of World War I and earned an Iron Cross for bravery. He watched many of his closest friends die in front of him, and this forever changed his religious and philosophical thinking. It shattered his conservative upbringing and made him into an existentialist and staunch defender of all ideas and movements that fought mass conformity and false ideology in all its guises. Politically and in many, many other realms, Tillich is still incredibly relevant for us in this moment. He rejected nationalist authoritarianism because it is based on false, idealist myths of a special origin or some racially pure society. As a religious socialist, Tillich attempted to unite religious and social democratic ideals to overcome the extremes of nationalism and fascism on the right and communism on the left. He saw both lacking an understanding of the transcendent element in human experience. Similarly, although he was committed to science and the scientific method, he was wary of scientism and other ideologies that sought to exhaustively explain all of reality in strictly physical or materialist terms. He believed that science was an absolutely vital way of understanding ourselves and our world, but that even if all of existence could be described by this method, there still remains a sacred, inexplicable dimension to human consciousness, at least for those who are open to it. At age 47 and speaking no English, Tillich was offered a position by Reinhold Niebuhr at Union Theological Seminary, just in time to escape with his life and family from Germany. The entire faculty of Union forfeited 5% of their salary in order to bring Tillich to the school. It was then he decided he would not write in German again. Astonishingly, he learned and mastered English within a very short time, though he always maintained his thick German accent. Now, about my book and what led me to write it. It's essentially an introduction to Tillich's thought, largely based on his seminal 3-volume systematic theology. For those not familiar with it, it's a very demanding 900-plus page work. My book comes in at only 158 pages, so it's not meant to be a detailed examination of his work. I don't cover every concept and idea, but instead try to focus on what I see as the primary points. The first time I encountered Tillich's work was when I bought a Jaroslav Pelikan book of short essays on the topic of religion. In it, he included Tillich's short section from the end of his classic work on existential philosophy, The Courage to Be. The section is titled, The God Above God. The title alone had my complete attention. After reading that short excerpt, I knew I couldn't stop until I'd read as much of Tillich as I possibly could. Then, when I arrived as an undergraduate at UC Santa Cruz in the early 1990s, I had the good fortune of meeting Paul Lee. As I mentioned earlier, he was Tillich's last teaching assistant at Harvard, and he had come to UCSC not long after the campus was founded to teach philosophy. He had been teaching at MIT and Harvard prior to that. While teaching philosophy at UCSC, he founded the Religious Studies Department, and he also taught in the History of Consciousness Department. Lee was an interesting and sometimes controversial figure. While teaching at MIT, he met Timothy Leary, and he was appointed founding editor of the Psychedelic Review, along with Ram Dass. He also participated in the Marsh Chapel psychedelic experiment at Boston University, which included the famed religious scholar Huston Smith. Lee and Leary offered Tillich the opportunity to try LSD during this time, but as Tillich's grandson Ted Ferris has recently written, Tillich said he was, quote, from the wrong era for such experimentation. While at UCSC, Lee also founded the first organic garden ever on a university campus, along with famous originator of biodynamic farming, Alan Chadwick. He wrote a book on this titled There is a Garden in the Mind, and I've put a link to it below. In 1976, under California Governor Jerry Brown's leadership, Lee and UC Santa Cruz historian Paige Smith also began the California Conservation Corps. Lee eventually left teaching and got involved in a lot of social and ecological programs in Santa Cruz, the most prominent being the Homeless Garden Project, which students at UC Santa Cruz were also very involved in, including myself. The idea behind the program was to provide homeless community members a way to develop some useful skills and earn money, and then get off the streets and into permanent housing. It also produced exceptional organic produce for the local Santa Cruz community. Decades later, the program is still up and running to this day. Dr. Lee has published and edited several interesting books, one being Tillich's small The Meaning of Health, which I've put a link to below. In 1999, Lee and I had the privilege of presenting papers together at the North American Paul Tillich Society meeting during the American Academy of Religion conference in San Francisco. It was a real honor to be his friend and to collaborate with him. And the last time I visited him at his home in Santa Cruz, he took me into his garage and pointed to some boxes in the corner. He told me I could go through them and take any of the documents, manuscripts, or letters I wanted. To my surprise, when I opened the musty boxes, I found many of the old personal letters he and Tillich had shared during their time together at Harvard, discussing travel plans, planning ideas for Lee's lectures when he filled in for Tillich, and other personal musings on life in general. Paul passed away in Santa Cruz on October 20th, 2022. During the time of our presentation at the Tillich Society, I was getting my master's degree at the Graduate Theological Union in Berkeley. I came there to pursue studies of Tillich and Carl Jung, with my particular interest in the relevance of Tillich's thought to the issue of environmental and animal ethics. My master's thesis focused on this, and I went on to publish it in 2017 in book form as Faithful to Nature, Paul Tillich and the Spiritual Roots of Environmental Ethics. I've put a link to it below, and I may even make a few short videos on it in the future. Regarding this issue, I want to quickly note the significance Dr. Albert Schweitzer had on Tillich. For those who aren't familiar with him, Schweitzer won the Nobel Peace Prize in 1952 for his concept of reverence for life. This is a principle I try to live my own life by, and as Schweitzer himself succinctly describes it, a person is not truly ethical until life itself, both plants and animals, as well as our fellow humans, is sacred to them. Tillich credits this radical concept of Schweitzer's as having largely inspired his own life philosophy. To quote Tillich, "I have come to the idea that every theology which separates men from nature is completely mistaken. Nature participates in man, and men participate in nature. And for this reason, I feel now more than in earlier years the impact of Schweitzer's idea of the inviolability of life. I even have a large section in the forthcoming third volume of my systematic theology under the title, The Inviolability of Life." Of course, we now know that Tillich instead called this section of his system Life and the Spirit, and it's here he develops his most significant contribution to environmental ethics, the multidimensional unity of life. If you want to read more about this topic, you can pick up a copy of my book, or you can read an essay I contributed on the subject for the recent Mercer University Press book, Why Tillich, Why Now?, which was published in 2021. If you're interested in the incredibly wide-ranging Tillich scholarship out there, I'd recommend the book. I've put a link to both the book and my chapter below. While I was at the GTU, I was also fortunate to meet and take a couple of classes from Dr. Durwood Foster. Foster was also a teaching assistant to Tillich at Harvard, and he went on to have a distinguished career as a systematic theologian. The most memorable of my classes with him was one called Christian-Buddhist Dialogue, co-taught with GTU professor who was also a Buddhist monk and academic, the Venerable Hang Sure. Foster is known for editing and writing the introduction to the book form of Tillich's renowned 1963 oral lectures he delivered at the GTU, titled The Irrelevance and Relevance of the Christian Message. This is another book I would highly recommend, and I've linked it below. A final influence on me at the GTU came from my few interactions with Dr. Robert Kimball. Kimball was appointed by Tillich to be his literary executor when he was only 31 years old, and he held the position from 1959 to 1987. After Tillich's death, he worked for many years with Tillich's wife, Hannah. Kimball was a professor at the Starr King School for the Ministry at the GTU, and I had several really meaningful discussions with him in his office. I never had the chance to take one of his classes, and looking back now, I wish I had spent more time with him. All these experiences make me realize just how amazing the connections were the GTU had to Tillich. Tillich's thought is very complex and often hard to comprehend, but through my personal discussions with all these professors who were so close to him, I came to realize that in the end, Tillich is offering a very simple message. None of the theological or philosophical doctrines or arguments surrounding religion are ultimately important. What is important is our lived experience and how much we can embody what he called the new being. In short, how much love, courage, compassion, forgiveness, grace, and reason can we let flow through us in our short time on earth? My book is based on the belief that Tillich's thought is universal, timeless, and essential, and I want to make it accessible to as many people as I can. That said, even Tillich knew and admitted his system was not final, and he lamented toward the end of his life that he could not go back and rewrite much of it, especially after his deep conversations with Shinichi Hisamatsu, a professor at Kyoto University whom Tillich had several meaningful dialogues with. Hisamatsu was a philosopher, Zen Buddhist scholar, and Japanese tea ceremony master, and their fascinating dialogues have been published if you're interested. I'd like to read one of Tillich's quotes to show just how significant his trip to Asia was for his thinking and life. Quote, "It has confirmed my theological conviction that one cannot divide religions into one true and many false religions. Rather, one must subject all religions, including Christianity, to the ultimate criterion of religion, the criterion of a faith which transcends every finite symbol of faith, and the criterion of a love which unconditionally affirms, judges, and receives the other person." Okay, I'll leave it at that for now. My next video will cover the first chapter of my book, which is titled Fundamentalism and the Loss of Depth in Religion. So please subscribe and hit the like and notification buttons to be alerted to my upcoming videos. Thank you, and thanks for taking the time to watch. I really appreciate it.